I was in the pasta aisle at the grocery store, fluorescent lights buzzing above me, carts squeaking on the tile. Everything smelled like plastic bags and cheap produce. I was holding a jar of marinara, staring at the label like I couldn't read it. And then someone down the aisle slammed their cart into a metal shelf. It wasn't even that loud. But my body reacted like a bomb went off. My hand tightened. My heart started racing. My mouth went dry. That's the thing about trauma. You can look completely calm on the outside and still feel like you're under attack. And people love to say, it made me stronger. Stronger? No. It made me scan for exits every time I walk into a room. It made me flinch at kindness. It made me trust no one. It didn't make me stronger. It made me survive. And those are not the same thing. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just done laundry, and the apartment still smelled like lavender detergent and lies. The sky outside was this sickly shade of gray, like the sun didn't even bother to show up. I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone, pretending I wasn't waiting for the sound of his key in the door. When it finally turned, everything in me went still. The door didn't just close, it slammed. The kind of slam that makes picture frames rattle and your chest cave in. He didn't say a word at first, just stood there in the doorway, breathing heavy, eyes locked on me like I was the problem he couldn't solve. There was this twitch in his jaw. I knew what that meant. I tried to speak, to ask what was wrong, but the words got stuck somewhere between my ribs and my throat. Then he snapped. His voice exploded, ugly, sharp, the kind of yelling that doesn't just hit your ears, it hits your bones. He called me useless, crazy, said I made him like this. Every word felt like a punch without the bruise to prove it. I just sat there, silent, hands gripping the edge of the cushion so hard my knuckles went white. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I knew better, because if I cried, he'd call me dramatic. And if I fought back, he'd call me violent. So I disappeared inside myself like I always did. The room got smaller with every step he took toward me. And when he finally turned and left, it wasn't relief I felt. It was numbness. People think trauma is the event, but trauma is the echo. It's what stays, what seeps into your skin and makes everything afterward feel unsafe. That day never ended. It just found new ways to haunt me. Before everything shattered, he was my favorite person in the world. We met in October. Not the kind of October from movies. This one was quieter, windy. The sky was the color of ash. I was late to a poetry reading I didn't even want to attend. He was standing at the back, leaning against the wall, arms crossed like he was guarding something tender. He noticed me before I saw him, and when I finally looked up, he smiled like he'd been waiting, not impatiently, just knowingly. We talked after the reading about how terrible the coffee was, about Sylvia Plath, about pain and poems and why sad songs always hit harder. His voice was warm, familiar. It felt like stepping into a room where I used to live, even though I'd never been there before. He brushed my arm when he laughed, like he couldn't help needing that little contact. And I let him. I wanted him to. He didn't kiss me on the first date. He held my hand instead, lightly, like he was asking permission without words. The second date, he brought me a single daisy. Said he remembered I told him roses made me nervous. No one had ever listened that closely. We'd lie in bed for hours, his fingers tracing the length of my arm like he was trying to memorize it. He'd whisper things like, I didn't know peace until you. And I believed him. He'd cook for me. Nothing fancy. Just pasta with too much garlic and wine we couldn't pronounce. We'd dance barefoot in the kitchen while it boiled over, laughing like nothing outside those four walls could ever reach us. He made me feel chosen, not just loved, wanted. Like I was the calm in his chaos. Like I was the first place he'd ever been able to rest. I remember the way he'd brush my hair behind my ear before kissing me. How he'd cut my face like he was anchoring himself. How he'd text, home yet? After I left, even when he knew I was still in the elevator. It was soft, safe, sacred. And I handed him every version of myself because I thought he saw them all. But what I didn't know was that he was only borrowing the gentleness, studying it. So he'd know exactly how to destroy it later. The shift was so slow, I almost missed it. Like watching the sun go down. You don't notice the darkness until you're already sitting in it. It started small. He'd say, are you really wearing that? And smile right after, like it was a joke. He used to text, home yet? Now he'd leave me on red for hours. And when I brought it up, he'd say I was being too sensitive, too needy, too much. He stopped asking how my day was, started pointing out how lucky I was to have someone like him. At first, I thought he was just tired. We all get tired, right? But then he started getting angry over things that made no sense. A waiter got my order wrong and he blamed me. I laughed at a scene in a movie and he said I was immature. He used to love that I cared too much. Now it annoyed him. Now I was emotional, dramatic, exhausting. I remember once I cried in front of him, really cried, chest heaving, trying to explain how overwhelmed I felt. He stared at me like I was a problem he didn't have time to fix. Then he walked out, didn't say a word. That was the first time I felt truly alone, while still being in love. I started changing myself, softening my voice, double-checking my words, trying to become smaller, easier, more lovable. But no matter what I did, it was never enough, because the goalpost kept moving, because he didn't want love, he wanted control, and somehow I let him have it. Life didn't stop. That's the cruel part. I still showed up. I still smiled in family photos, my arm wrapped around people who had no idea I hadn't slept in days. At work, I cracked jokes in the break room, hit deadlines, gave presentations. Everyone said I looked great, focused, strong, but inside, I was unraveling. I'd wake up gasping at 2 a.m., drenched in sweat, convinced he was standing in the hallway. Every noise became a threat. Every knock on the door made my heart stop. I couldn't sleep without checking the locks 3 times. I avoided mirrors, crowds, my own reflection. I stopped hugging people. I didn't mean to, but even kind touch felt like an invasion. My skin flinched before my brain could explain why. And when someone raised their voice, even if they were just excited, my whole body tensed like I was about to be hit. But I kept functioning. That's the scary part. I kept laughing at the right times, kept saying, I'm fine, like it was my job, because I thought if I broke in front of people, I'd lose whatever pieces I had left. So I became an expert at hiding, and no one knew. Not really. Because when the world sees you coping, they stop asking if you're okay. He didn't leave. He never left. He stayed, like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Some nights he'd hold me so tight it felt like love. Other nights he'd scream so loud the neighbors turned up their TVs. Once he punched a hole in the wall 2 inches from my head. And when I gasped, he said, "You're so dramatic. I didn't even touch you." And I believed him. That's the worst part. I started questioning my own memory, my own bruises, my own worth. I stopped seeing friends, stopped answering texts, stopped being the version of myself anyone would recognize. But Rachel kept trying, kept calling, kept showing up at my door with coffee and that look, the one that said, "I see through you." One night, I finally let her in. I hadn't eaten all day. My hands were shaking. She sat across from me on the couch, eyes locked on mine. "What's going on with you?" she asked. "You look hollow." I didn't know how to say it, didn't know how to form the words, but then it just came out. Slow, broken, like glass spilling across the floor. "He yells at me," I whispered, a lot. "He gets in my face, tells me I ruin everything." Rachel leaned forward, still and silent. "Last week, he grabbed my arm so hard I had finger-shaped bruises for days, and the next morning he brought me breakfast in bed, like nothing happened, like I had imagined it." She covered her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't you tell me?" I laughed, bitter and tired. "Because I knew what you'd say." "Then let me say it anyway," she said. "This isn't love, this is breaking you." I wanted to argue, to defend him, to say it was just stress, or childhood trauma, or the way he grew up. But instead, I just cried, because for the first time, someone had said it out loud. Someone had called it what it was, and it made it real. It made it terrifying. Because when you're inside it, you convince yourself it's not that bad. You call it complicated, passionate, flawed, anything but abuse. But that night, hearing it from her lips, I realized I wasn't just surviving a bad relationship. I was surviving him. After that night with Rachel, I thought maybe things would shift, that maybe saying it out loud would loosen the grip his voice had on my mind, but if anything, the silence afterward felt louder, like the truth had finally been spoken. And now, there was no more pretending. I couldn't unsee it, couldn't unfeel it. And that's when everything inside me started to crack. It happened in the middle of Target, right between the throw pillows and the bath towels. I was just there to buy toilet paper. That's it. But something shifted. Maybe it was the smell of that cologne he used to wear, cheap and sharp and clinging to the air like a warning. Or maybe it was the man behind me yelling into his phone, his voice slicing through the aisle without a care. My brain didn't wait for permission. It just reacted. Suddenly, my hands were shaking, my throat closed up. My heart started pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I froze, right there in front of a display that said, "Home is where the heart is." I remember thinking, what if I fall? What if I scream? What if I never come back from this? The lights above me were too bright. The floor felt like it was tilting. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe. No one noticed. People walked around me like I wasn't even there. When I finally stumbled out, I sat in my car for what felt like hours, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me to earth. I got home, locked the door, sat on the bathroom floor in the dark. I didn't eat, didn't speak, just rocked back and forth like a child trying to calm a storm no one else could see. That night, I woke up screaming, so loud I scared myself. The sheets were soaked in sweat. My pulse was racing. I had dreamt he was standing over me, grinning, and I couldn't move. I couldn't scream in the dream. But apparently, my body made up for it when I woke. I turned on every light in the apartment, sat with my back against the closet door, knees pulled to my chest, eyes scanning the room like something might still be hiding there. I opened my phone, typed in trauma therapy near me, stared at the list, and closed it. I wasn't ready. Not because I didn't want help, but because I didn't believe I deserved it. I kept waiting for the strength everyone talks about, but all I ever got was silence and flashbacks. I didn't mean to end up there. It just happened. Same store, same aisle, the one with the pasta sauces lined up like nothing ever changes. I stood there again, frozen for a second, staring at the same stupid jar of marinara, the one I dropped the last time, the one that almost shattered. Just like me. A cart slammed into a shelf behind me. Same noise, same sharp metallic crash. And for a split second, everything in me screamed run. My heart jumped, my vision blurred, and I heard his voice again, clear as day. God, you're so sensitive. Stop making everything a problem. I clenched my jaw, tight, but I didn't move. Instead, I whispered, barely audible, "You're not here, not anymore." A woman passed by with a toddler in her cart, humming softly to her baby. She didn't look at me, didn't know that I was standing in the exact spot where I once thought I might die of a panic attack. I gripped the jar in my hand. It shook a little, but I didn't drop it. I placed it in the cart, breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth, and then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I let myself feel proud, because I remembered how it felt the first time. The sweating, the gasping, the shame of falling apart in public and no one noticing. And now, here I was, still scared, still healing, but standing. I looked up at the ceiling lights and whispered, "You didn't win." The truth is, no, the trauma didn't make me stronger. It made me cautious. It made me question every raised voice, every loving hand, every locked door. It made me study people like puzzles, trying to spot the crack before it explodes. It didn't make me stronger. It made me aware. It made me real. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Because I'm still here, not untouched, but undefeated. It's been 3 years. 3 years since I left. 3 years since I stopped calling his number, just to hear the sound of disappointment. I live in a quiet apartment now. There's light here, soft pillows, plants I keep forgetting to water, and a couch that no one has ever thrown anything across. Sometimes I still flinch at loud noises. Sometimes I still wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing. But now, I know what it is, and more importantly, I know what it's not. I'm dating someone new, someone kind, someone who asks, "Can I touch you?" instead of assuming the answer. The first time I cried in front of him, I apologized. He looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "Why are you sorry?" he asked, brushing my hair behind my ear. "Because I was trained to be," I whispered. He held my face in both hands and said, "You never have to apologize for feeling." And I broke. Right there. Because no one had ever said that to me before. Healing doesn't mean it's all gone. It means it doesn't own you anymore. And now, it doesn't own me. But sometimes healing is interrupted. It was a Tuesday, again. Because of course it was. I was at a cafe with friends when I heard it. His laugh, that exact laugh. The one that always came right after the cruelty. Like he was rewarding himself. I turned, slowly, and there he was, across the street, older but not different. And on his arm, a woman, young, bright, smiling, just like I used to be. She laughed at something he said and touched his chest like she was safe. I felt sick. Because I knew. I knew. I saw the way his hand grazed the back of her neck, controlling, possessive, the same way he used to do with me in the beginning, when it still looked like love. My hands trembled. My stomach turned. I wanted to run to her, to warn her, to say, "Please, get out before you forget who you are." But I didn't. Because I knew she wouldn't believe me, because I wouldn't have believed me back then either. Some devils wear perfume and say the right things, and some cages look like comfort until the door slams behind you. I walked away, tears in my throat, guilt in my chest, and a voice inside me whispering, "You got out. That has to be enough." But it didn't feel like enough. Sometimes I think about her, the girl I used to be, the one in the bookstore that October afternoon, the one who smiled at the stranger with the warm eyes and the charming lies. If I could go back, just for a second, I'd grab her hand before she said yes. I'd whisper, "You don't need to earn love by surviving it. You don't need to become small to be safe. You are already enough." She wouldn't believe me. Not then. She wanted to be chosen so badly. She thought being wanted was the same as being safe. She thought attention meant devotion. She thought control looked like care. But maybe she'd feel something. Maybe she'd pause just long enough to question, to ask why her stomach twisted every time he smiled, to ask why she always felt the need to apologize for needing gentleness, and maybe that would have been enough to change something, even just a little. But I can't go back. I can only go forward. So now I write letters to her in my mind. I tell her, you made it out. You're safe now. You're not weak. You're sacred. And every time I choose peace over panic, every time I choose softness over silence, I choose her. Every time I stay, I choose me.